welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is called Reimagining Motherhood, because that is what we want you to do. Reimagine what is possible in motherhood that our cultural narrative keeps veiled, hidden, shamed, locked away. All the things.
Gosh.
That's where we want to take the conversation today, and certainly is in lieu of this month's celebration within Soul-Driven Motherhood, which is every week a live workshop where we're really talking about the intricacies of how motherhood serves all 7 areas of life and seeks to empower them. So by virtue of that is on the way, not in the way. So you can join Soul-Driven Motherhood at any point in time. It's just $39 for the whole month. And in there is a plethora of conscious parenting courses for just about anything that you're feeling a little bit glitchy on, as well as an incredible community and conversations that we just get to sporadically start up and have. So it's really quite a delicious place to be. So you can find out more about that at nourishingthemother.com.au. And while you're there, please scroll on down to the red banner and drop in your email address. And every so often we send you out an email letting you know what is going on in the world of Nourishing the Mother, so that you can pick and choose and you don't miss out on anything. Please join us at nourishingthemother.com.au.
So I'm really excited about this one because I think that the transition to motherhood for many women can feel so world busting open-ish that in the depth of all of the identities that we've held as women before motherhood, there comes a rebirth of who we are. But if we're looking to reference ourselves and our worth and our role and our responsibility through the lens of our dominant culture, we can very often not value who we are and not value what motherhood gives us in terms of our own personal development and growth and inspiration as women. And so that's really the theme of this podcast and also of our month in Soul-Driven Motherhood, which is really to challenge that dominant cultural narrative. And through our stories and of the stories of the women that we're going to bring into Soul-Driven Motherhood in these workshops, it's going to really challenge and enliven the conversation around just how much motherhood is a pathway for profound growth and expansion in who you are. And that the gift of raising our children and of seeing them as great teachers and also of, you know, as great wisdom keepers as well, for us to learn about ourselves is really where motherhood can come alive for you. And that's what we really hope to do in this podcast and also in that group. Would you say so too, Jules?
Yeah, 100%. I'm really looking forward to being able to have juicy conversations, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the 7 areas of life.
Yeah. So if we consider, and so 7 areas of life is actually something that really was born for us in our Loathing to Loving program. So many years ago when we started, that's our signature program, and what we continue to have women continue to cycle back to, because the foundation there is so rich. And it's really the principle that for all of us as humans, we are here to learn mastery and grow our skill set and capacity in every area of life. So if we consider that we have a spiritual area of life, a mental area of life, a vocational area of life, financial, physical health and body, family and social, and throughout our life, we are going to focus our value system in a number of those, often not all at once. However, the path is to expand in all of them. And the more that we have awareness of our innate desire and blueprint or map, really, to expand those areas, the more that we can ask ourselves creatively how, for example, motherhood helps us grow each one of those areas. And that's what we're going to step out in this podcast and riff between ourselves on what motherhood has done for those areas of life, and where perhaps we might have felt like there was a barrier, and what it looked like for us to step past it and empower it, and where we're still working, because we always will be, right? But I think it's seeing examples of what it looks like to enter it, and dance with it, that gives you more permission and a map to do it for yourself.
So I'd love maybe just to riff that out just a little bit, if you don't mind, Bridgie, while we're here. The concept that I love that you talk about is the idea of the spinning plates. So if we consider we have the 7 areas of life that largely cover our experience as humans. So very separate to traits such as I value connection, because we will experience connection within different areas of life. So I will experience connection in relationship, and I will experience connection in my family, and I will experience connection socially, depending on which one is empowered. If you have a high financial empowerment, you will experience your own connection or connection with others in money, in finances. So I think people often get mixed up. There is the way that we're talking about values is not so modern day light worker. I value inspiration and
freedom,
joy, and we're talking about when you're living in your top values, those things are innate. What we're talking about is the spinning plates. We have all of these areas of life that essentially enlightenment is in when each one is fully empowered and functioning at such a high vibe level. None of them feel like they're balls that are dropping or that you're having to juggle. They're just all spinning radically well. At that point, we'd be enlightened and no longer require the physical.
And puff into the universe. Right?
Like the Incas. So the idea, so there's that, which I think people often get stuck on the way that we talk about values versus the way that perhaps other spiritual spaces might. And the other one I wanted to touch on was the concept of the flat plane of I value everything versus, actually there's a hierarchy of values. Can you step that out a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So in reality, so we might fantasize about this idea of having everything nailed all of the time, but we all live in a spectrum of order and chaos. And we're going to have the most order, which is organization, which is, focus.
Which is where we're going to feel good.
We're going to feel lit up. We're going to feel like, yep, I see the challenge, but I'm nailing it because I can see how it's on path.
And our self-worth is going to be through the roof because we're going to be like, oh my God, I'm so amazing.
Exactly right, that. And even if you're having one of those down days where you're like, but I'm not that anywhere, you will have it somewhere, right? So if you're having one of those days, just look closely, you'll have it somewhere. And conversely, we also have chaos in our life. So we have right up the top kind of this nailing it, yep, I'm awesome, and then somewhere hidden in your life, really, really low priority for you, it's a shit show. It's in chaos, it's disordered. If somebody asked you where something was in that area of your life, you'd be like, fuck, I don't even know. Like, it'd just be a shit. Everyone has it. Some people are just really good at hiding it. Or it exists in shadow. It can exist in the shadow being everything that we're not aware of, right, in our consciousness.
Or choose to bypass. I would put bypassing within that as well.
Choose to not
bypass over a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, and our values, so what that looks like, that spectrum of order and chaos, is directly proportionate to the hierarchy of our values. And our values are demonstrated by what our life looks like and where we spend our time, what we're thinking about, what we're appreciating in our life, where our energy goes, what we're talking about to people, what people are talking about to us. So basically, what our identity looks like right now is what our values are. And that will be in a hierarchy, and some will be the highest in our values are the things that nobody has to ask us to do, that we will wake up and just do because it's high value for us.
We're inspired by it, and we experience freedom and self-worth and purpose and
joy
and inspiration and energy, right? Like all the high vibe sensations are what we're going to feel in that area. Yes, those areas will also come with challenge, but the difference is, which I'm more than happy for you to talk about too, Bridget. The difference is if family is my top value, right? So parenting. If I experience parenting and challenge, experience challenge within my parenting, as opposed to somewhere lower down, let's say would have been money at one stage, I would have just stuck my head in the sand or pretended or just put it on the credit card and bypassed around it and kind of just kept duck paddling. In parenting, I go, ooh, that's a problem. I'm going to sink my teeth into that. So this is also the difference between higher values and lower values.
And our lower values, so our higher values we tend to do, and as you say, sink your teeth into, and our lower values we tend to delegate. So if somebody has parenting at a much lower value, they're going to delegate it. They're going to delegate their child to the system, to a specialist, to somebody to fix them, and it's easy if you have a value on parenting to judge that. But that person simply has a higher order to something else in their life, and that they are the person that you might seek for information on finances or for information on having a meticulous home or something like that. So they're no less worthy. They're just that their own worth is invested elsewhere. Yeah. And there'll come a time where that may actually be really attractive to you, and you change the perception of that person in your eyes because you have shifted your value to see their worth more, because you're not projecting your value onto them. Because what we tend to do is we tend to project our highest values onto other people and think that they should value what we value. And we also do that to the world at large. So that's what happens in voting, right? So people vote for governments based on their own values, and they'll like a leader if they see their own values reflected, and they'll dislike one if they see their values challenged. So we're all doing this, and it's important to understand that projection, because then we can take more ownership of it and see that we are the co-creator of our experience, because the feedback that's coming back from the world is often in direct challenge or support of our own values. And so if we consider that it's possible to then recognize how we can empower all of them by asking ourselves good quality questions, we can then see that motherhood, not simply being something that we do on the side, but something that's intrinsic to our own identity and therefore opportunity to grow in these areas, we can link seemingly disconnected things that we tend to do as mothers to the enrichment of all areas of life. So a great example is how motherhood helps you build your social influence and social skills and social connections. Because when you're a mother, you can't hide away from the world if you're wanting to raise emotionally intelligent children. You have to be pulled into new spaces and places where you might not have otherwise gone. You have to learn to communicate with people who are different to you. You have to learn to navigate, specialist appointments and school boards and all of these other areas that you get pulled into this growth path, which if you enter with the level of, okay, I can learn something here, you then come out of that with a set of skills that you can then transfer to other areas, that you can take into job interviews, that you can take into, leadership
colleague relationships,
so many things. But because we live in a culture that doesn't really value the development of those skill sets that are innate in your motherhood, we can self-minimize, and you know, you'll see this is rife in women who spend time out of the workforce and then go, but I'm just a mum. Never mind that being just a mum has been a profound, like, you know, I don't know, boot camp of expansion in all these ways.
Mm.
And so I've got a list of all these things, but I want Julie, feel free to jump in because I can.
Am I seemingly too quiet for you?
Oh no, but I'm as I'm saying this, I can see, like, over the past 5 years or 7 years that we've known each other, 5 years of the podcast, I can see like your journey in and out of these values and your transference of a skill set that you've developed in community to then take that and move that
100%.
other areas, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you and I talked about this, and even if we flash back, as I think I said to you, one of the most, it's so funny because I often look back on my life in terms of powerful conversations.
Right.
So, if you have flashbacks, I feel like the string of my life actually revolves around powerful conversations that pivoted my life dramatically. And one, I said this to you the other day, one of those such conversations that was powerful and pivotal for me was when I found out, and I was devastated, I was pregnant with my fourth. And I'd said to you, like, basically my life is over. Like, everything that I had worked so hard for empowering and could see the trajectory of continued empowerment of, felt like with the virtue of becoming pregnant and being beholden to, again, because I get very sick as well, being beholden to my body and another dependent child off of my breast and body and sleep and all of the things that new motherhood brings. I was like, that's it. My life is down the toilet. Like, this is it. I pick a baby and my life is over, or I don't pick the baby and I get to have my life. That's how I saw it. And I saw the flaw in my thinking, which is why I brought that up. Like, that's very shadowy, right? Like, it took enormous courage to really own the fact that I was saying that. And all of the previous labels and identities that had constructed what ultimately was the opposite. Like, they were revolutionary to the identity that I had formed up until that point in time, right? So it was massively destabilizing and massively vulnerable to say, here's really what, and it's the shadow, right? So of course we're called into equilibration. So everything that I had demonized externally and projected values onto, here I was facing them, because what you condemn, you bring, you'll become, right? So here I was doing all of those things in one fell swoop. But because I'd said that, I said to you, I know that I'm only seeing this world one-sided. Like, I know that here's where I'm at, but I also know that's where I'm at. And one of the most powerful things you said to me was, yeah, but I just see this as expansion. Family is your top value. When you experience expansion in your top value, what else expands by virtue of that? How does this serve your children's emotional development that you're so passionate about? And how does this serve your relationship with them and with Nick? And how does this serve and change the work that you so want to do in this world? And at the time I was like, I can only very, very, very faintly pinhole one of those. I really, and as I said to you, and I went and had I paid for some DMartini facilitation. Like, I knew I was really in it, and the only way to get yourself out of it when you're in that is to not stay in your own head. So I had spent a lot of conversations with you. I'd hired a facilitator to really work through that shit with. So I really invested in, I know I need to come into equilibration before any decisions can be made. And I'm so far from equilibration. I'm like on the seesaw that's way balanced on one end. So that was one of the most powerful conversations that I still revisit in my brain over and over and over again, because I cannot believe the prophecy that was in that, because it's incredibly true. I couldn't conceive of any of it being true based on what I knew of the world up until that point in time and what I saw around me. But it's 100% true.
I can still remember where I was standing when we had that conversation, and I just felt a level of certainty that was unwavering.
Oh, and I felt that. That's what I'm saying. It was like, it was so rock solid that I was like, maybe. You know, but my point was, it sounded like pie in the sky. There's this tiny part of me that's like, anything's possible, right?
Yeah.
I know that I need to equilibrate my brain enough that I can see that as a solid possibility before I make any life decisions, because or else it becomes an emotional one and I regret it. But now, being 3 years or 4 years on the other side of that, it's so true that it kind of blows my mind. So anytime I start spiraling, and because we continue on those, you know, spirals throughout our life, anytime I start going, oh God, how am I going to do all of this, or what, you know, blah, blah, and I start going, oh God, motherhood is starting to, what am I, all these kids and needs, and I can't do the things that I want to do in the world. I instantaneously recall that conversation and then almost let myself feel the fast forward motion of how true that has been. Like, and so I let myself emotionally almost stack that as a forward movement of just provenness.
Yeah.
And I feel into the fact that having that fourth child, and I think for the first time in all of my journeys, being so consciously equilibrated in that experience, like there was not one part of her pregnancy and newborn / life in general that I have been highly infatuated or in high, whatever the opposite of that is.
Yeah, you were pretty equilibrated, like, and you were pretty like,
I worked really hard on that, yeah. But I wonder sometimes if by virtue of that, it's part of what has busted it open so extraordinarily well, that all I can see is expansion. Like, I look at this fourth child and I think, how the fuck did I ever think we couldn't have you? Like, how could I can't, I feel like if I hadn't have learnt what I have learnt with her, no way would I be doing what I'm doing now. Like, no way, no way. And no way would my home be filled with as much joy. And my older siblings, I was pretty sure it was going to suck the life force out of them.
I can still remember you feeling terribly guilty and really teary about its impact on Heath.
Yeah. Because there's 11 years between Heath and Gwen, like, it's massive. So I remember thinking, well, they're like these people in the world now, and I'm going to be back at, like, I need to be home for naps. And funnily enough, when we had Heath, we had a foster child, and it was the same age gap. He was 11. So it was the same years. And I always found that really hard, because the things that an 11-year-old boy wanted to do were the opposite to what I needed to do with a little baby.
That is so interesting. I didn't know that detail.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it actually only just occurred to me then, because I was thinking in my body, what was that feeling? And it was that, because I remember being having to choose in these moments. And we ended up splitting. Like, I said to Nick, look, basically it was Nick would go and do stuff with our foster child, and I would be home with the baby, because we couldn't work out how to mesh the two in a way that felt good for everyone. So it was more of a divide and conquer. And I felt, obviously, I had stored feelings from that. And so I'm here faced with the same thing, only in my own biological family. And I'm thinking, this is never going to work well. And what it has been is like the total opposite of that. Like, I'm not even articulating because I'm just feeling it, but the amount of emotional intelligence and awareness of love and capacity and leadership and guidance and ability to play at different age levels and be responsible for kids at different levels of care, that I look at my son now and I think, oh my God, you're already a better parent than I was at 30. Like, already at 14, by virtue of having such a big age gap and being, in a way, kind of like partly a parent through this process. So, yeah, we always talk about he's got to be a brother and not a parent, but by virtue of there being such a big age gap, he's naturally taken on that provider and protector role that just becomes innate in that dynamic. And I look at the learning and the growth out of that and how radically different that is to his peers and the way he can it's just magnificent. I mean, and same with my daughter Jade, and same with my special needs 6-year-old child who was so all-consuming in our world that I couldn't even like comprehend how that whole situation was going to go, has also done the same thing. It's like she grew up and she had someone who was younger than her, and also because she doesn't and would never move if she didn't have a reason to, she has this younger person that one, she's at the same physical ability of, even though there's a significant age gap. So she has a playmate in all of the ways that she doesn't have a playmate out in the big wide world. And as this, 2-year-old sibling overtakes her in capacity of her body, that she pushes, I see her innately try and push herself because of the challenge to want to be able to do the same things. And I just look at all of it and I go, oh, my God, this is like unbelievable. And the 2 older kids have become like besties. The 2 younger kids are like besties. So that's pretty much how ISO has worked. Like I've just watched my teens like become best friends, like thick as thieves, hanging out together, joking, having inside jokes, like just amazing. And a boy and a girl as well. That was always one of my biggest wounds, was that I only ever grew up with a sister. And so learning the world of boys, was one of the major traumas of my life. And I watch this and I think, oh my God, that's already the panacea. Like,
yeah, just
already undone. Yeah. She already knows he's another human, and they've worked out, the whole thing, this kind of blows my mind. And by virtue of all of that, I have felt such an enormous freedom in my heart and in my body that is part of what exponentially expanded, and capacity, like literal capacity, right? Like emotional capacity, nervous system capacity, physical capacity, organization capacity, just by virtue of it needing to be, goes through the roof, and it's a top value. So of course I work out how to meet it, has meant that has effortlessly streamed into my work. Often my work that wouldn't have happened without my 4th child.
Because you took the structures and capacity that you'd built in the family and morphed them to apply to your work. And because you'd trained yourself so well in family to go, well, no, there just has to be a way, I'll figure it out.
Right.
You've then had to do that in your work. And that's also meant that there's been a more effortless pivot because of COVID as well, because you've gone, well, there's my limited thinking is simply just my limited thinking. So I have to push myself beyond that and see where it's possible.
Yeah. And by virtue of the fact that I'm still a full-time stay-at-home mum with 4 kids, I could no longer separate work and family, particularly with a newborn and a special needs child who in many ways is harder work than the newborn. So because I couldn't separate it, I stopped separating it. And the more that I bring my children into what I'm doing, the better my business gets. So, and I watch them learn, like, I just love it. Like my kids are excited about talking about tech and what it is to be on a social media platform and what it is to be a healer and how we construct our soul's work into something that we have an ecstatic exchange with in a financial sense with the wider world, and what that looks like to have an effortless exchange that feels really good for everyone, and how community expands, and just all of the things. They just they have sat on, business strategy calls and things with me before, and learning groups and containers, and they're really excited about it because I'm not hiding it from them. And the same thing with Nick. I stopped hiding it from him too. It stopped being, the dirty little secret until at some point it was earning enough that I could, take up time and inconvenience you, would have been my mindset previously. And I was like, I fucking love this and I have to do it. And I know it makes everything, right? The more full of life force I am, the more effortless our home life is, and the more effortless our relationship is. And the whole thing just has to work totally differently. And that was the gift of not having another option by virtue of having a newborn.
I love that story. And I remember that was a big edge for you too, and I dance it, was the valuing your work enough to not feel like to feel like it has to earn its space in the family. And because we have to undo a lot of the imprint, like the generational imprint, particularly that is on mothers, to first and foremost mother, and that anything else is like secondary to that, when in fact when you start to see how the business serves all of it. And even this morning I had a great example of that when I was sitting down researching people to get on the podcast, and my son, my 7-year-old, was sitting there with me, and we're talking about money and wealth and what it means to find an expert who knows that information, and why it's important to plug into people who are masterful at what they do and what they can teach us, and to end up being this random conversation.
Exactly. Even just that conversation, I feel like, is life-changing.
Yeah. And yet if we had thought that our work had to be separate all of the time, then these would be conversations that would go on in offices or in clinic rooms, away from our children's eyes and ears, and they'd potentially be worse for it because they're not getting that that leadership and that opportunity to see how to carve their own way in the world that looks maybe different to what they otherwise would see. Yeah. So, I mean, just so you know, everybody goes through spirals. I mean, Carly Marie calls it bear mode. I just think it's part of the cycling of not letting the thing that holds you back stop you. You just kind of tuck under your wing and you just keep going. But it's important to have tangible people or memories that make you see a different reality, or at least the reality you're trying. So the evidence, I suppose. You don't always have to have evidence to know something on a deep soul level. But I think when you're having a moment of struggle, it is really helpful to plug into who is running that different narrative. And so that's the time I call on exactly that conversation that you and I had. And I remind myself of all of that and I go, yeah, so let's just keep going. And also to start with where you are, like some of our listeners might dream of perhaps building a business alongside their motherhood, but that is not where they're at right now. But know also that the time that you're in is also a beautiful time to build foundations, right? Because the quality of our life is also based on the quality of the foundations in which we build to support us.
Yeah.
Those foundations look like the quality of your relationships. It looks like how you can set up your home and your rhythms to support you. It looks like how you can help your children to support themselves so that they gain, slowly the independence that they need to move in the world. And those are small things that aren't always seen and heard and witnessed and celebrated by the outside world, and the things you may not see for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but they are these slow and steady, one foot in front of the other points in which you build mastery and you build deep connection and you build independence and resilience and love and connection. Like, even this time in COVID, in our what appears to be a never-ending lockdown here in Melbourne, it has been a really great time. I've been journeying the dark mother a lot, probably more than I have ever journeyed it in my life. And so it's been a really profound time of sitting in that and not trying to escape out of it, but understand it more deeply and to unravel it and tease it open and ask her what she needs and recognize, what is generational imprint that's coming up now for me to unpack, and then ask myself, what do I need in my home and my relationship to support my expansion into that depth and into that descent, not who needs to do things for me so I can escape this feeling. And so the questioning around what do I need in my home looks like what ways work for me and my children to help empower them more. What systems and soft structures can I create that helps everybody feel better here and helps everybody feel more self-responsibility here to be able to care for themselves and come back and care for each other and use that expansion and contraction within the home that, you know, the greater universe is asking of them and all of us.
Can you run through, before we wrap up, can you run through some points that you had on the different areas of life? Did you say you'd written down some points?
Yeah. So for spiritual, I really talked about motherhood as, you know, we really see our reflected self through our children, and that we get called to meet the parts of ourselves that we haven't yet moved through or heard properly. And so in fact,
motherhood is the temple. And it is the scripture. There is nothing that you cannot learn through your motherhood. You can go to a monastery, you could disappear to India for 6 years, but you will have exactly the same lessons, if not greater and faster ones, in motherhood.
And that's because family is the most powerful vehicle for transformation, because children are genetically programmed to express what you repress. So whatever you deny, you will run into in your child. And the more that you can breathe into that and allow that to infiltrate your cells and welcome it, that is the pathway to mastery.
It's a pathway to love of all.
Love, yeah.
To love, to spiritual ecstasy, to awakening, all exist when we are trying to move into the world of non-duality, where we stop trying to split. That is what motherhood does.
And you would also notice you see where you contract, you see where you habitually become rigid, you see, and therefore your next evolution past that point. And then you have it, you expand into it, and then you hit the next level, and then you contract again. And that is the growth that, as you say, you're going to meet on the mat somewhere in the world if you choose that path.
Right.
Mental, we talked about that, capacity, skills, you know, how to bring things to a higher order, how to recognize chaos, how to create order from chaos, delegation, managing competing priorities, building vision as well, because you can build a vision for a family just as much as you can build a vision for a company. Vocational, so development of communication skills, dealing with overwhelming demands, looking for areas of growth in the family. Yeah, as well. Team building, is that what you just said?
I said pivoting.
Pivoting, yeah, and I had here team building, because family, you know, teamwork makes the dream work.
You have to speak in people's values, don't you, and create a win-win, which is an exceptional mastery.
Absolutely. Financial, so responsibility. So by virtue of being responsible for a family, you're actually asked to be more responsible with money and a vision for money. You're getting opportunity to shift family patterns. So patterns you may not have become aware of, you now become aware of, that are in your own psyche and in your own childhood story, that show up with your relationship, with how you respond to your children around money. So that comes up to be grown up, essentially. You get a bigger why. And so when you get a bigger why, your hows, the opportunity of a how begins to take care of themselves, because you've now got a why that's bigger than you. So you're then asked to create greater financial mastery. Physical, so you've got role modeling. So if you're wanting your child to love their body, to move their body, to nourish their body, then you are being given the gift of the beacon for that, the blueprint for that, the model for that. So how can you use your motherhood to be that? It's not about asking your child to do anything you wouldn't do for yourself. So motherhood asks you to step into that more. That's an area that I've definitely got to grow more into in movement, for example, and I know that.
I even think that in terms of a healthy lifestyle, like I don't stop moving all day.
Well, yeah, and exactly right. The incidental exercise in motherhood, right? Like it's constant.
Whereas I look at my husband who's sitting at a desk on a computer all day, and I'm like, I don't stop moving. Like even just that. And there's a constant contact with the physical body. And it's probably more even paramount if you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding, or even when there's pains and hurts, the awareness that we have and the connection that offers us. Like I still think it's such a gift to the body. And I love what you're saying, which is to be able to repattern all of our past woundings in order to create a different future for our children, then we're asked to heal and build connection and go backwards to like into our body so that there's a pathway of freedom forwards for our children. Like that's empowerment of physical health. Not to mention the fact that now we want to make sure that we've kept our children healthy and they've, you know, got all of their supplements and their vitamins and their cold and flu whatnots and their, you know, and we just become more health conscious by virtue of trying to keep our children healthy. Yeah. So there's such a building of physical awareness, connection, and health well-being by virtue of that.
The other one I had was obviously about, you know, family. And so building of relationship, deepening of legacy, understanding family patterning and family story, considering, you know, the 7 generation principle. So looking back 7 generations and 7 generations forward, like what's meaningful to you and what do you want to leave? What do you want to carry? You know, what do you want to change at a cellular level in terms of your own relationship to your children, to yourself, to the world that you would love to pass on generations forward? Like that is like a massive why, right? Like, and that then gives you such vision and such reverence for the very vehicle of your motherhood, for what it means for the world and for your generations beyond you. And social, just great opportunity for connection, leadership, deepening of love, understanding of polarity, seeing, you know, diversity and inclusion and walking in another person's shoes. You know, so much opportunity that motherhood offers you, and even the friends that your kids come home with, and how that asks you to have to expand to, you know, meet your own edges and, you know, see, you know, what comes up for you in that with your own story. Like it's enormous. Like we could go on and on and on. I feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is why we really want to make sure that we're both role modeling this as well, because we want there to be a voice in the world. We do see that there's a significant lack in mothers that have motherhood as a top priority and also are able to do, be, and have the things that they want for an empowered and lit up life out in the world, as opposed to one coming at the expense of the other. Or in order to have a career, I have to have my kids in care, or whatever version of that is that we see. Or, you know, I'm a multimillionaire, but I have completely dysfunctional relationships. So we're really making sure that what we're doing here is in integrity and in alignment with our top values, because we know what makes a meaningful life for us. We're so clear on that. So we don't ever look at sacrificing or sabotaging our alignment, because we know that has long-term ramifications, health ones included, right?
Yeah, because your body will be feedback for that too. Yeah,
exactly. So which is why we wanted to do Reimagining Motherhood in Soul Driven Motherhood this month, because we want there to be a conversation and a narrative that says, look at the gold mine that is in motherhood here, that you have daily access to if you so find it inspiring and opening. If all you do is see the drudgery and the drawbacks, you're missing the moments of expansion and growth and energy building and giving and opening. So we're just wanting to really make sure we're having a thorough conversation around all of the social taboos that we perceive we break and have reverence for.
That's another one that often gets seen as motherhood as the burden, and that I'm always giving, and that my children don't appreciate me. But what that's doing, like that's still a perception, because it's missing the fact that in every moment there is an exchange, there is a fair exchange.
Equal exchange of giving and receiving.
And so you've done a little bit of work around this.
I've done a lot of work around this.
So do you want to share a little snippet, because I know we will talk more about that in Soul Driven Motherhood, but do you want to share a little bit of a real life story of how you've been collapsing that one?
Yeah, look, I mean, because that is one of the beliefs that I revolt against from my childhood, because I was made acutely aware of what a drain I was and how ungrateful I was, and of all of the things that were done for me. And there was never validation given back, or, accolade, or whatever the equilibration was supposed to be of the giving back for the gift of life and looking after me and food that I was supposed to repay as a child. And so I have an enormous oh God, And here's my imperative language. I will never do that to my children. I chose to have children for me. I chose to give life to these beings who don't owe me anything. They don't owe me anything. I chose this, and I still choose it every day, and I would choose it again. They don't owe me anything. And then I look at all of these benefits that I get every day. Like, motherhood made me. And with every child, I've been remade into something infinitely more beautiful than I was in the evolution previous to it. And I have no doubt that if I continued to have children, that would continue. I don't doubt it. I really don't. Now that I've seen what's happened with this fourth child, I'm like, oh, I really get it now. I think I've glimpsed it previously, but now I like really get it. And I have such a level of gratitude. Like, I'm so grateful every day that they choose to spend their life with me, that I don't find myself in this state of, oh God, you just take everything from me and you don't realize how good you've got it. I don't ever go there because I've been the child of that.
Yeah, so you're acutely aware of it.
I'm acutely aware of it. And because I'm so acutely aware and in such a high state of gratitude, because I see every day and I remind myself, it's a mental practice every day of, wow, look what I just learned here, or look what I'm practicing here, or look at all of the ways this serves my life. And I look back almost daily and think, oh my God, look, I learned that here. And you gifted me this experience, and I changed because of you here in this moment. And because I'm in my parenting every day, I'm continuously reminding myself of those things. And I know, particularly with my practitioner hat on, that there is an equal amount of giving and receiving in every moment. So you might give money in order to receive an energetic healing or an insight or a download or an opening. And in that, even you're giving me money, I'm giving you healing, you're receiving healing, I'm receiving money. And that cycle just continues and spirals bigger. That's the initial exchange. And then in that healing, I'm healed even deeper. And then my healing and expansion equals your healing. And like, the giving and the receiving is continuous. It's never one way, ever. And in the moments where I'm of service and in service to my children, I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time this year, particularly meditating upon Sati, so the goddess of the divine mother. So, you know, Virgin Mary might be another version if you're looking at it from Catholicism. But as opposed to a right and a wrong and a black and a white, I'm sitting on it in terms of the feminine capacity to be of service, that is the spiritual nourishment and honoring, is I can be of service and I can love and I can sacrifice. I can learn everything about life through this service. And in the giving of that service, I receive everything I need to know about life. Like that, it's like a wormhole. There's always. And I always think I end up, even as the giver, I end up receiving more. If I've got to the point where I'm like, I'm doing everything and you're doing nothing, I have fucking missed the mark days ago, because I have overridden my boundaries. I've pushed instead of rested and laid back and received, because the feminine is giving and receiving, right? Like, we're never in one form. That is why all of the goddesses will have an arm that gives and an arm that receives. It's the ham's a hand, right? Like, you've got to receive inwards, which is probably the deepest feminine form of nourishment, in order to be able to give outwards with our masculine polarity. If you've got one the wrong way, then that's just an energetic imbalance, and you can work on that. If you're not fully receiving, then it gets to the point where it's pretty hard to keep just giving if you're not allowing yourself to receive. It's not because the giving doesn't exist there in an equal measure. It's because you don't let it in. Yeah.
Or you've blocked your capacity to see it.
Yeah.
I often think about that, like, you know, culturally we tend to have this thing of, oh God, like, you know, even today, like, oh, thank God the kids go back to school. But I think, but like, have you not just missed all that you've received this whole time that they've been home with you, like in your giving to them? You know, like we think about like, oh gosh, you know, I've got to be with my kids all day or whatever the dominant thing is when you're tired or strung out. But like, what about like what you get to receive in terms of like, wow, like my child has chosen to spend their time with me. So
that's really how I feel.
So who do I want to be if that's the case? Like if I get to be in their vicinity, how do I want to show up to that person? Like, how do I want to be in relationship with that person who's choosing to be in relationship with me? Like, I feel like it changes the narrative completely, because it says that, you know, you're not just like loved with children. You have an incredible privilege to get to spend time with these people who didn't really get to choose who you are, like, but you are making yourself in response to them. So how do you want to be in relationship with them, knowing that like they can't go anywhere, but they're giving to you even if you don't know, even if you're not willing to see it or receive it based on whatever your own imprint is, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you run into.
If they did nothing and stood in the middle of the room, I would still be receiving. But you've got to be open enough to the energetic movement of giving and receiving probably to be aware of that. But if you can conceive of the fact that you pay to plug into somebody's energy, like a business coach or something, right? Or someone who you find deeply inspiring, or a concert that you love to go to, or, you know, a musician that you love to see. We are willing to pay to plug into somebody's energy in order to feel different. That's all that is. It's a receiving of a frequency that person is vibrating at. So even if my children did nothing and I simply sat next to them, I'm receiving a blessing. So I choose to be here.
I just love it. I so love it. So, because what it does is it gets you to undo whatever your mother wound is, really. Because you'll have some kind of mother wound that says that you have to do, mine is like you have to do something to be worthy. You have to kind of almost earn your keep, which was hers, right? Like she had to like make all of her siblings' lunches when she was 5. Like, you know, you have to do something to be worthy to be here. And you don't undo that in one generation. That continues. So there's remnants of that come down the line. But that every time we hit it, it's an invitation to go, no, I don't choose that anymore. But it's a loop. You know, like you talked about that labyrinth, like you'll keep running into it.
But I think if you're aware that you're running into it, then you're here to be the pattern breaker for it.
Yeah.
If you weren't aware, it would just continue and you wouldn't be aware. I think if you're aware, you're meant to be the pattern breaker. And I think you probably already are by virtue of the fact that you're simply aware of it. And often awareness is enough to change the pattern, you know?
Yeah, I do.
So I choose to be here, I think is my mantra.
I love it.
Even on the shittest days, I'd still choose this over and over. I'd still choose it.
Me too.
So we'd love you to come and join us in Soul Driven Motherhood this month or more. We're not sure how long these workshop series is going to go on for because we feel like it's really meaty.
Yeah.
So please come and join us. You can find out more at Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram, nourishingthemother.com.au, and to connect with you, Bridget.
Suburban and you, Jules.
It's thepleasurenutritionist.com.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.